Today on Chainlinked, it's a deep dive into Chainlink Keepers. The Chainlink Labs product team joins me to talk about how Keepers bring smart contract developers added decentralization and automation in smart contracts. Chainlinked is a pocket-sized podcast series looking at the many applications of Chainlink blockchain oracles across global enterprise, the blockchain industry, and emerging tech projects. We'll break down the news and frame Chainlink technical innovations and integrations for any listener. My name is Dr. Andy Boyan. You can call me Andy, and I'll be your host. Chainlink Keepers are a decentralized way to automate smart contracts. Basically, smart contracts can outsource regular maintenance tasks to a Chainlink network, which serves as a trust-minimized, hyper-reliable automation bots. Now, there's many Chainlink Keeper use cases, and we're seeing many projects integrate Keepers alongside their Chainlink price feed or VRF integrations, but also all new projects are entering the Chainlink ecosystem to use Keepers. The Keepers product team at Chainlink Labs actually reached out to me once they found out I had a podcast because they wanted a chance to come on and talk about Keepers and explain kind of what they're doing for smart contracts. So Anush is in product management at Chainlink Labs, here to talk with us. Anush, how you doing, man?
Hey, Andy. Very good. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic.
When it comes to the smart contract automation space, there are a lot of concerns that have to be taken into account, a lot of considerations that have to be made in order to create smart, sophisticated hybrid smart contracts that are automated in several fashions, whether it be a cron job that needs to run, or you have a set of events you'd like to have trigger on-chain activity, some set of conditions you want to have happen. In order to make this actually doable, users have to create centralized solutions or like build out their own infrastructure that can be quite expensive and difficult to maintain. So when we tried to come up with something around Chainlink Keepers, it was really about making it easy for users to create decentralized smart contract automation in a highly reliable and easy to integrate manner. So what we wanted to do with Chainlink Keepers was provide a decentralized smart contract automation solution that is highly reliable and easy to integrate. The goal being dApp developers should not have to put in a lot of work in order to make sophisticated smart contracts and should not have to rely on immediate user input for the driving of on-chain actions. So Chainlink Keepers makes all of that easy for you. You can integrate within a matter of like minutes to hours. We've had some of our users go online from testnet to mainnet in a matter of a day.
I want to back up a sec because, the idea of smart contracts as they're supposed to be automated. Like that was the vision of smart contracts, is that they don't need human input. But, it seems like there's not an integrated automation component to them. And so Keepers are a solution to make automation possible. Like where did that, mismatch come from?
If we look at what smart contracts are able to do, it really is able to provide you a high degree of confidence in what is the truth on chain. But a lot of what needs to happen and drives actions has to come from off chain. Someone needs to interact with the blockchain, with a smart contract to take some action, which means you need to have some methodology, in most cases, an individual, a user with a key, broadcast a transaction to the network, and then a string of actions are taken on chain. That's very useful. However, to become more sophisticated, you really do need to make it so that if I'm the end user and I want to take an action now, and based on some other conditions, some other actions taken later on, there really isn't a good way to do it with smart contracts at this time. They are really designed to provide you with a high degree of confidence in what is the truth, but you need something else to really help drive full automation. And I think some of that started off with like the initial set of problems around how do you take off-chain data and put it on-chain. Mm-hmm. That was solved through the Oracle problem that we've seen that Chainlink has helped solve. Now we're really tackling how do we do that for a more generalized set of problems. You need actions to be taken on-chain, and you don't want users to be sitting at the end of that or DevOps teams sitting at the end of that taking actions on your behalf.
So, for Oracle data, you can use Oracle data to automate something with a smart contract. When the price of ETH hits X, then do this thing, and then you set it, and it will automatically execute. But there's a bunch of other tasks that are not just straight up a smart contract execution. They're like more regular tasks that don't necessarily have a price feed or weather data or something like that. Is that the difference there?
I'd say it's actually somewhat orthogonal in some ways. Getting the data on chain allows you to get the most up-to-date information so that smart contracts can be more, let's say, dynamic in what they are doing. We need to have the most up-to-date information to have the correct set of operations take place on chain. However, even then, a user or some external party has to say, at this, I want to do something. That something that they do then triggers a read of some price feed, which then has a smart contract go down a particular code path and finish its execution. And the state changes is dependent on the data that's been brought on chain. So let's take an example of, say, you want to execute a limit order. At if the price hits Y, then execute the order provided it stays below Z. You can just post that, and I can do that right now. And then maybe that occurs 5 hours from now. When that occurs 5 hours from now, when the condition's met, it should automatically execute. That's something that requires external automation.
So this is positioned as a developer tool mainly, though. So what are sort of the benefits of using Chainlink Keepers as opposed to like manual or centralized solutions?
That's an excellent question. So what we wanted to do in building Keepers was to make sure that we create something that's highly reliable. So reliability in this case comes from a couple of different factors, including the fact that we are using a decentralized network of node operators that are currently securing several DeFi protocols and are responsible for making sure that the price feeds that are currently live on multiple blockchains are highly reliable. So in addition to that, we're making sure it's reliable by ensuring that the keepers take turns, and therefore no actions that are being taken on chain are being done by any one keeper. It's distributed across the entire network, and keepers have to take turns in performing actions. The other aspects that I would say that are most valuable are that we can integrate, any dApp developer should be able to integrate Chainlink Keepers in a very easy fashion by just writing their code in Solidity. They already write Solidity code regularly. Within their Solidity code, they can define the conditions that need to be met in order for action to be taken on chain. And therefore, if you want to get up and running, you don't need to worry about any deep integrations. You don't need to worry about, do I need to write some logic in a different language and have that run in some centralized server somewhere? You just deploy your Solidity code and you register your upkeep with our registration process. And in doing so, you're essentially able to push some Solidity code that you have to run off chain. So our network essentially is checking for conditions at essentially running in a full cycle at all times. In the Ethereum mainnet, it's running your check upkeep at every single block. So rather than spending a lot of on-chain resources, all of that work is pushed off-chain. And when the conditions are met, you can trigger on-chain activity immediately. And that transaction is broadcasted to the network as soon as it's detected.
Looks like there's a lot of different sort of use cases that we're seeing emerge. And I've seen announcements for rebasing, for yield harvesting, and other sorts of things. What are some of the use cases you're seeing, or some other ones that you've considered that might come out in the future?
We are essentially in what I would consider like the 1995 internet days. And as more and more technologies are introduced to allow for, in this case, simpler automation infrastructure, as we introduce more and more products to make dApp developers capable of doing work that perhaps would take organizations the size of like an enterprise organization to build new software and new technology and new use cases. I don't think we know exactly where all this is going to go, but once we have automation infrastructure available to end users that can build out their own software, their own dApps within a matter of minutes to hours, having automation automatically built in, I think we're going to start seeing some substantial changes. We have a lot of applications that are driven based on the fact that automation infrastructure is difficult to maintain. So a lot of what exists happens to be driven by user input rather than automation infrastructure. I think we've seen a movement towards automation infrastructure in the last year and a half or so, perhaps even longer. But I'm not sure we can say really what are the next set of use cases.
One of the things I see in the announcements a fair amount is there's a team that has been doing something, has been harvesting yield, has been executing the smart contract. And that team doesn't want the responsibility. Like they got to stay up late at night and they got to make sure and do this timing and do this stuff. And so by just offloading that to a decentralized network, they basically offload the trust to a decentralized network and somebody else who maintains that reliability and it kind of lets people sleep at night. It's actually a little bit similar to offloading oracles to the Chainlink network as well. Instead of running your own oracle, you just offload it to somebody else who you know is going to do a good job. Is that sort of similar value?
I think there's definitely a lot of good parallels there. Even when you're thinking about like non-blockchain world, there is always this value in having a organization that is highly focused on building one set of capabilities is going to be able to do it better than, say, you or I independently trying to build this out ourselves. They're servicing a plethora of other users that need the same thing. And I think in the case of oracles, Chainlink has helped create the ecosystem that allows for all these projects to hopefully make use of data as well as expand by requesting more data from Chainlink oracles. Similarly, we're expecting, and I'm hoping, and we've already gotten some user feedback on the Keepers product we've launched, we want to keep expanding the capabilities of our automation infrastructure. So over time, you can have even more feature-rich automation capabilities. And to that extent, yes, we want to make it easier for dApp developers that are, say, a group of 2 or 3 who get together. They want to build something cool and new, and they don't have the time or perhaps the funding to build, maintain, and have a team that handles all this operations infrastructure.
Do you have a personal philosophy when it comes to building Chainlink? Like what drives you to be part of building the Chainlink infrastructure and ecosystem?
Yeah. Okay, so I guess I would have to start from what brought me into blockchain space in the first place, and then just general philosophy around building product. I think the blockchain space is just very interesting in the sense that it is changing the way we think about how organizations should interact with one another. It allows us to reduce the trust we have to place in legal contracts, in how a brand is going to operate and provide us with a high degree of confidence in what is going to happen. And I think blockchain really is helping drive a change that will take years for it to fully see, will eventually see as the fruits of what blockchain can provide. And to the extent of like how we get there, I think in product development philosophy, you really need to understand your users. You need to listen to them, and first and foremost, you want to make sure that they're getting what they need. You shouldn't just be building something that no one is actually looking for. But at the same time, it's also important to recognize that no one knew they wanted an iPhone before it existed. It was something revolutionary, and as we continue to build products, we need to make sure that we're thinking about what our users need, as well as what can we create today or in the next year or years from now that will allow for hybrid smart contracts to become even more feature rich, to the point where we want to have developers, instead of selecting centralized applications, we want them to say, you know what, I can build this decentralized. That we want to make that the go-to over time. And I think to do that, you really do need to think about decentralization and reliability as top of mind as you're building these products. So make sure we understand our users, recognize that some of these technologies that we're building are really enabling a new set of use cases potentially that we cannot necessarily think of in its full extent upfront. And therefore, we should be able to build something and think about it as a decentralized system that is highly reliable, and over time see what comes of it. We're in the internet of 1995, and in the next 5 years, we're going to see some amazing things come out of it.
I like the way you position it as it's something I could do today to make these next things possible, whatever they may be, whatever that design space is, and to step back in a couple of years and look and say, we made that happen. Like that's something really exciting to me about, being part of Chainlink Labs and being part of building this stuff.
Absolutely. Could not agree more.
So the first time I met you, we were doing a team building session. I don't remember what for. We were instructed to come up with like just a product, invent a new product, use your imagination. And we came up with a new data feed that actually turned out to be a pretty cool idea. Do you remember this?
Yes, I think this was the yes and exercise.
Right.
Where no matter what the other person says, you just have to build on it, keep going with it. And I think what we came up with was excellent. It was solar data, and it wasn't just about panels, it was about detectors having it all around the world, feeding it onto a contract on chain, which can then be used for various purposes, like, detecting whether the harvest is going to be good this year, like literal, like physical agriculture, not just like, yield harvesting, but actual harvesting.
Right. So as there's a solar farm that's harvesting sunlight, it's a device that tracks how much energy they're pulling in these various farms, and it could be panel by panel how much they're pulling in, and you could detect how much energy a farm is actually making, and then submit that on chain for whatever use cases it might be.
Yeah, I could see definitely plenty of insurance use cases or like futures trading taking advantage of detectors and solar panels and such like this.
And we talked about like carbon credits and all that stuff. I'm remembering it now that this was a good idea. What I remember is like we left that session, like a team building session. We were in Slack, like, okay, it could do this and it could do this. And I don't know where that ever went. Of course, I started a podcast instead of starting a solar feed. But
I think we agreed that there were a number of barriers for entry, but that an enterprising startup should dig into this and see if they can come up with something, because it could be very cool.
Okay, open ecosystem. The idea's in the wild. Take it, run with it. Maybe something for declimate. Who knows? Anush, thanks for coming on, man. It's been great chatting, catching up with you, and learning a lot more about Chainlink Keepers. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Andy.
Hey, everybody. That's 7 episodes. We did it. Honestly, I'm really thankful for the opportunity to meet and talk to so many amazing guests. I get to record it, send it out into the world. I appreciate your reactions, your thoughts supporting Chainlinked, and I'm really excited to keep growing Chainlinked as part of Chainlinked Today community, and of course, to help listeners understand more about the Chainlink ecosystem. When I started this podcast, I always imagined someone would hear an episode and have an aha moment when something just clicked for them about Chainlink, or maybe they just knew exactly who to send an episode to, so that person could then begin their journey with Chainlink oracles. If this is you and you just had an aha moment, do something about it. Tell me on Twitter or in the reviews. Let people know how you think they can use Chainlink. Because that's really the point of this show. Grow Chainlink by growing the education and insights into the Chainlink ecosystem. Now, it would really help the podcast if you could share, rate, and review the podcast any place you can. Next, follow me and Chainlink Today on Twitter. I'm at Andy Boyan, and you can get updates on the podcast and a lot more at Chainlink Today. Again, thank you for supporting the podcast by listening and being an active community member. Stay in touch and come back next week for even more guests. Okay, I gotta go. I'll catch you next time.